Right now, there's a voice in your head deciding your future. And it's not your boss, your parents, or society. It's you. And if that voice is weak, doubtful, or apologetic, then no matter how hard you work, you're programming yourself to lose before the game even starts. But if you change the way you talk to yourself for just 3 days, not months, not years, 3 days, you can rewire how your mind reacts to fear, pressure, and opportunity. If this is hitting you right now, don't just listen, commit. Type in the comments, I control the voice. That one sentence is your first act of authority. Most people believe their thoughts come from their conscious mind, but in reality, the first place your self-talk lands is your nervous system. And that changes everything about how you perform under pressure. Because before logic ever gets a vote, your body already decides whether you are safe, threatened, confident, or collapsing. And the words you use with yourself are the fastest way to program that reaction. When you say things like, I can't, I'm tired, or this is too much, your nervous system doesn't analyze those statements. It obeys them, shifting you into hesitation mode, slowing your breathing, tightening your chest, and preparing you to retreat, even if the situation doesn't actually require fear. On the other hand, when your self-talk carries authority, clarity, and certainty, your nervous system switches to command mode. Your posture changes, your breathing deepens, your focus sharpens, and your body prepares for action before your mind even finishes the sentence. This is why two people can face the same challenge and react completely differently. Not because of talent, not because of intelligence, but because of the way they speak to themselves in the first 3 seconds of pressure. The nervous system is the control center of performance, and your inner voice is the remote. Every command you give yourself becomes a biological instruction, shaping your energy levels, your emotional stability, and your ability to stay calm when others panic. When you train yourself to use decisive language, you are not pretending to be confident. You are teaching your body how to respond under stress. And once your body believes you are in control, your mind follows automatically. This is why changing your self-talk for just 3 days can feel like flipping a switch, because you are not just changing thoughts. You are rewiring the system that decides whether you advance or retreat, whether you stand firm or fold, whether you lead yourself or get dragged by circumstances. And once your nervous system learns a new pattern, it doesn't need motivation anymore. It simply executes the identity you keep reinforcing every time you speak inside your own head. Most people try to change their lives by changing habits, but habits are slow, fragile, and dependent on motivation, while language reshapes identity instantly and permanently, because the words you repeat about yourself don't just describe who you are, they quietly decide who you become. Every time you say, I'm bad at this, I'm not that type of person, or this just isn't me, you are not stating facts, you are issuing identity commands, and the brain treats identity as law, reorganizing your behavior to match the label you keep reinforcing. This is why two people can read the same book, hear the same advice, and walk away with completely different results, because one speaks in possibility and the other speaks in limitation, and language always wins that battle. The mind doesn't argue with the identity you give it, it obeys it, building habits automatically to stay consistent with the story you tell about yourself. When you shift your language from action-based to identity-based, everything accelerates, because instead of saying, I will try to be disciplined, you say, I am disciplined. And now discipline is no longer something you chase, it is something you protect. Your brain works harder to stay consistent with who you believe you are than with what you hope to do, which is why changing the way you speak to yourself can transform behavior faster than any routine, schedule, or motivation trick. This is also why negative labels are so dangerous, because even when you joke about them, your nervous system takes them seriously and slowly adjusts your confidence, your posture, and your decisions to match the role you keep playing in your own head. When you deliberately choose stronger language, you are not lying to yourself. You are upgrading the operating system that runs your choices. And once that system changes, your actions follow without resistance. This is the hidden reason why people who sound confident often become confident, and people who speak in doubt often stay stuck, not because of talent, but because identity is built in sentences long before it is proven in results. And the moment you control your language, you start controlling the direction of your life without needing to force yourself every single day. Most people think their brain is designed to seek truth, but in reality, the brain is designed to seek familiarity, and that is why repetition always beats accuracy when it comes to shaping belief, because the mind doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "Have I heard this enough to make it feel real?" This is why a lie repeated often enough starts to feel like a fact, and a powerful idea repeated consistently turns into an identity, not because logic agreed with it, but because the nervous system accepted it as the new normal. Every time you repeat a thought about yourself, whether it's empowering or limiting, you are strengthening a neural pathway that makes that idea easier to believe the next time. And after enough repetitions, it stops feeling like a thought and starts feeling like who you are. This is why people stay trapped in old patterns, even when they intellectually know better, because knowing something once is weak, but hearing something 100 times creates certainty, and certainty drives behavior. When you tell yourself, "I always mess things up" enough times, your brain doesn't challenge it, it prepares for it, subtly guiding your focus toward mistakes and away from progress, making the belief feel proven even when it was programmed. The same system works in your favor when you use it intentionally, because when you repeat statements of control, strength, and direction with conviction, your mind begins to organize your perception around those ideas, filtering experiences that support them and ignoring the ones that don't. This is why 3 days of focused self-talk can create such a powerful shift. Not because your life changes overnight, but because your internal narrative crosses a threshold where it starts to feel natural instead of forced. Once that happens, your actions stop requiring constant willpower, because you are no longer fighting your own programming, you are finally working with it. The brain's loyalty is not to truth, it is to consistency, and whatever you feed it most often becomes the voice it trusts the most, shaping how you react, what you attempt, and how long you persist when things get uncomfortable, which means the real power is not in discovering new information, but in deciding what story about yourself you are willing to repeat until it becomes the one your mind automatically lives by. Most people try to change their mindset by repeating positive words, but what actually rewires your brain is not the words themselves, it is the emotional tone behind them, because your nervous system responds to how something is said far more than what is said. You can tell yourself, "I'm confident" 100 times, but if the tone inside your head sounds uncertain, defensive, or forced, your body reads that as danger, not power, and it keeps you in a state of hesitation instead of strength. This is why affirmations fail for so many people, because they sound like wishes instead of commands, and the brain does not mobilize for wishes, it mobilizes for certainty. When your inner voice carries calm authority, steady rhythm, and emotional control, your nervous system shifts into a regulated state. Your breathing slows, your muscles relax, and your focus sharpens, creating the physical conditions for confidence before you even think about being confident. On the other hand, when your self-talk is emotional, dramatic, or self-critical, even if the words sound motivational, your body stays tense, your mind stays reactive, and you keep operating from survival mode instead of command mode. This is why two people can say the exact same sentence to themselves and get completely different results, because one says it with grounded certainty and the other says it with hidden doubt, and the nervous system always follows the tone. Emotional tone is the language of the subconscious, and whatever emotion you consistently attach to your self-talk becomes the emotional default you live from. When you train yourself to speak internally with calm dominance instead of excitement or desperation, you are teaching your system that you are safe, in control, and capable, which automatically reduces fear and increases clarity. Over just a few days, this changes the way you react to stress, because instead of spiraling emotionally, you stay centered and decisive, not by forcing yourself to be strong, but by sounding strong inside your own head. This is the real reason controlled people seem powerful without trying, because their internal voice is not loud, not dramatic, not emotional. It is steady, grounded, and certain. And once your emotional tone changes, your entire mental environment shifts with it, shaping how you think, how you act, and how you show up in every situation without needing to hype yourself up or push yourself through resistance. Most people think confidence comes from feeling ready, but real confidence comes from the way you give instructions to yourself, because command-style self-talk creates instant authority inside your own mind, and authority is what the brain listens to under pressure. When you speak to yourself in questions like, "Can I do this?" or "What if I fail?" you place your mind in a position of uncertainty, and uncertainty tells your nervous system to hesitate, to slow down, to protect instead of to act. Over time, this changes how you see yourself, because every command you give yourself is a signal of status. And the more you hear yourself speak with authority, the more your brain updates your identity to match that authority. This is why athletes, soldiers, and high performers often use short, decisive phrases instead of long, emotional speeches, because clarity reduces friction, and friction is what drains confidence. When you replace soft language with directive language, you stop asking permission from fear, doubt, and hesitation, and you start issuing orders to your own behavior. This doesn't make you aggressive, it makes you stable, because stability comes from knowing that when pressure rises, you won't fall into emotional chaos. You will default to action. After just a few days of speaking to yourself this way, you begin to notice that you hesitate less, overthink less, and move faster, not because you suddenly became fearless, but because your mind learned a new leadership structure where your conscious voice leads and your emotions follow. Command-style self-talk turns you from a passenger in your own life into the driver, and once that shift happens, you don't need motivation anymore, because discipline is no longer something you chase, it becomes the natural response to the authority you've built inside yourself. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act, but the truth is, motivation is unreliable, emotional, and temporary, while certainty is structural and permanent. And that is why certainty always beats motivation when it comes to rewiring your mind and changing your behavior. Motivation depends on mood, energy, and circumstances, which means the moment you feel tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed, it disappears, leaving you stuck in the same patterns even though you know exactly what you should do. Certainty works differently because it does not ask how you feel, it tells you who you are and what you do, and the brain responds to that kind of clarity with immediate alignment. When you say, "I'm motivated to work," you are placing action in the hands of emotion, but when you say, "I work no matter what," you are placing action in the hands of identity, and identity does not negotiate. This is why people who appear disciplined are not constantly hyped or inspired. They are simply certain about their standards, and certainty removes the need for inner debate. The moment your mind knows there is no alternative, it stops wasting energy on hesitation and redirects everything toward execution. This is also why trying to pump yourself up with speeches, videos, or quotes rarely creates lasting change, because those tools only spike motivation, not certainty, and once the spike fades, the old patterns return. When you build certainty through the way you talk to yourself, you are not trying to feel powerful, you are deciding to be consistent, and consistency is what the nervous system trusts. Over time, your body begins to treat action as the default response, not something that requires emotional preparation, and that shift is what makes progress feel effortless compared to the constant struggle most people experience. Certainty simplifies your internal world, because instead of asking, "Should I do this?" you move straight to, "This is what I do." And that one change eliminates friction, resistance, and self-doubt at the source. This is why people who operate from certainty look calm under pressure, because they are not fighting their emotions. They are directing their behavior, and emotions eventually fall in line with repeated direction. When you train yourself to speak with certainty for just a few days, you begin to notice that you no longer wait for the perfect mood or the perfect moment. You move because movement has become your standard, and standards shape outcomes far more powerfully than bursts of inspiration ever could. Most people try to change what they do before they change who they believe they are. But behavior always follows identity, not the other way around, which is why identity-based statements rewire behavior automatically without constant effort or struggle. When you tell yourself, "I need to work harder," you are giving yourself a task. But when you tell yourself, "I am disciplined," you are giving yourself a role. And the brain will always protect a role more than it will chase a task. Tasks feel optional, identities feel permanent. And the nervous system treats identity as something that must be defended and maintained at all costs. This is why someone who sees themselves as a confident person walks into a room differently than someone who says, "I'm trying to be confident," even if their skills are exactly the same, because one is acting from who they are and the other is acting from what they hope to become. Identity-based language removes internal resistance, because instead of forcing yourself to behave a certain way, your mind naturally aligns your choices with the version of yourself you believe in. When you say, "I am the kind of person who finishes what I start," your brain begins scanning for opportunities to prove that statement true, guiding your focus, your energy, and your decisions in that direction without you needing to consciously push. This is why habits stick faster when they are tied to identity rather than goals. Because goals expire but identity persists. And once something becomes part of who you are, you no longer need motivation to maintain it. The real power of identity-based self-talk is that it bypasses willpower, because willpower is a limited resource, but identity is a constant reference point that your mind uses to decide how to act in every situation. Over just a few days of repeating identity-driven statements, your internal dialogue begins to shift from "should I do this" to "this is what I do." And that subtle change removes hesitation at the source. You stop negotiating with your future and start living from a standard that feels non-negotiable. This is why people who reinvent themselves often change their language before they change their lifestyle. Because the moment the story about who you are changes, your behavior has no choice but to follow that new script. When you speak to yourself in terms of identity, you are not pretending to be someone you're not. You are training your brain to recognize a higher version of you as normal. And once that version feels normal, your actions naturally rise to meet it without force, without drama, and without the exhausting cycle of trying to become someone new every single day. Most people think real change takes months of discipline and endless effort, but what actually creates the shift is not time, it is intensity of focus, and that is why 3 days of intentional self-talk can reset your baseline mindset faster than most people believe possible. Your brain is not slow to change, it is simply loyal to patterns, and once a new pattern is repeated with enough clarity and certainty, the system updates quickly, just like software receiving a new command. For years, your inner voice may have been running on autopilot, repeating the same doubts, excuses, and emotional reactions, and over time, that became your default setting, not because it was true, but because it was familiar. When you consciously interrupt that pattern for 3 straight days, something powerful happens, because the brain stops running on memory and starts responding to direction. The first day feels strange because you are breaking a habit. The second day feels uncomfortable because your old identity starts resisting. But by the third day, your system begins to recognize the new voice as normal, and that is when the reset happens. Not a dramatic life transformation, but a shift in how you react, how you think under pressure, and how you talk to yourself when things go wrong. This is the moment where you stop spiraling and start stabilizing, where instead of collapsing into emotion, you default to control. 3 days is not about perfection, It is about creating a new reference point, showing your mind what it feels like to operate from authority instead of doubt. Once your brain experiences that state repeatedly, it stops questioning it and starts preserving it. This is why after just a few days of focused self-talk, people often notice they feel calmer, more decisive, and less reactive, not because their problems disappeared, but because their internal leadership changed. And when internal leadership changes, everything else reorganizes around it. You no longer need to hype yourself up because you are no longer negotiating with your own mind. You no longer need constant motivation because your nervous system has learned a new default response to pressure. That is the real power of 3 days, not that you become a new person, but that you stop being controlled by the old one. And once that switch flips, progress no longer feels like a fight. It feels like the natural direction you move in when your inner voice finally starts leading instead of doubting.